episode 6 of the Chartered Show. Today I'm joined by Tiffany, Havinga, financial planning specialist at Chartered, and we're going to be discussing fairness isn't always equal. Tiff, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
So a number of times when we're in meetings with clients and we're chatting to them, they've got children that need different things. They've got some children that need their help. They've got other children that are successful out having their careers and don't need them to help. And yet what happens for parents is they feel a bit torn. Do we give money? Don't we give money? How do we do this thing fairly? So Tiffany, this is something that you're seeing more often than not. Maybe just give us a little bit more background to those meetings.
Sure, Kim. So, we actually saw a number of clients that were in this position where one of their children needed more than the other. And they were feeling quite guilty about it because financially they were supporting one child more still as an adult and not the other child. And they were trying to make it equal in their financial planning. And it's not always possible to do that, firstly, because they have, throughout the lifetime of your children, you have always spent different amounts on them. So it's near impossible.
Be honest, no two children are the same. No three children are the same.
So we've been exploring that topic quite a lot and getting an understanding that the first thing is that distributing equally is not always the fairest way to do things. Sometimes children may have different hobbies. So perhaps one does horse riding, which is expensive, and the other plays hockey. Both excel at the sport. Unfortunately, the child that's doing horse riding, yes, their hobby is a bit more expensive. Does that mean the child that's doing hockey needs to therefore get a larger inheritance one day?
And also we've got to realize when you're a child, you're not really aware of what these kind of things are costing.
No.
So it might be taking it to the extreme.
And the other sort of thought that I have around that is really children need to feel loved and supported. You can't love one child more than another, but you don't necessarily need to keep the finances equal. You can keep the love and the support and the care equal. That's important. But I think parents always think, well, I need to, make them equal financially. It's not necessarily the case.
That might be when they're younger.
Sure.
But again, Tiffany, when we've been sitting in meetings with a lot of clients who are now helping their adult children, we've also seen a lot of families where the children start kind of feeling like it's unfair, and they start seeing their parents sometimes really helping the one child, and then what that means for them is sometimes that they're not looking after themselves well enough because they're so busy helping the child. And then secondly, the child that is successful feels like, what about me? So what kind of encouragement or advice could you give in that scenario?
Definitely, Kim, and it's a very big theme where one adult child is dependent and the other is not. And it's got a number of consequences. The first, like you said, the child that is, the first is that the child that you are still financially supporting doesn't learn to support themselves. That can be problematic for the child themselves, but if they are never helped or enabled to become self-sufficient, what's going to happen one day when the parent is no longer around? That means that the sibling now needs to carry the dependent child.
And then take on that extra responsibility, which they don't want.
That's also a concern. The other thing that also becomes problematic, Kim, is if you are spending all of your finances and your money looking after your children, what does your retirement capital pot look like? Are you able to sustain yourself, or are you going to become dependent on the child, on one of your children? So there's so many consequences in the longer term that need to be thought about today in terms of supporting adult children. And it's difficult because it's your child and you love them. But some of the very useful recommendations that came through as we were having these discussions with clients is helping set them up for success. Help them with further studies as opposed to just here's money to go spend on a monthly basis. So enable them to become self-sufficient so that they can look after themselves.
And I suppose all of this starts with a conversation. So even for as a family. It's having those kind of discussions, because otherwise, if you're not having them, the one child might be getting quite resentful. Whereas if you can bring everybody together and have that discussion, as idealistic as it might sound, it's definitely way better for the health of your family.
Definitely. And you know, one of the clients that we did write about, we actually had a meeting with both of her children, and we discussed what would happen on passing, what would happen in the estate, but also, you know, what the outcome is. Having those difficult conversations. Sometimes if you bring your financial planner in, it's handy because they can play bad cop.
We always the excuse say,
yes.
Kim said, Tiffany said, and
yeah.
we can't do it. But then to just take it one step further, because something that I see happening a lot is around loans. So we give children, some children maybe need a loan to help them set up a business, buy a home, and maybe the other child doesn't need it. And if you did give to both, it meant you weren't going to have enough. How do you advise people around the writing of their wills when they've given big lump sums to one child and maybe not to the other children?
Sure. So it is definitely something that Chartered Legacy and Trust take into account. And they basically just include a clause about collation, which means over my lifetime, I might have spent different amounts on different children. That does not need to be collated at the end of my lifetime, meaning you don't have to try and equal things out in your will. So many of the wills that we have here at Chartered will say collation will not apply, meaning don't try and even things out between the child that received a loan. That often gets left back to the child in the will, but rather just call things quits. If you do want to even things out, there's better ways of doing it. For example, having a loan agreement with the child, which then gets, then you deal with it in your will, how that loan must be dealt with.
Can all be very complex, but again, I think it's all done on generosity. So anything we as parents give to our children and help our children out with is done with generosity. And I think that is a conversation in itself, that it's not an expectation, and to help you not feel that the guilt and the expectation is that you have to help out.
Definitely. It was interesting. We've recently had a discussion with my parents where my father was getting frustrated with my mom because she was saying, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, let's avoid spending too much money here or there, I want to leave an inheritance for my children. And both of us said, we don't need an inheritance, we are okay, we don't need it. So you don't need to feel guilty, we'll be fine, you look after yourselves, you live the life that you want to live. We know it comes from a place of love, but it's not a necessity.
And I think as well as a parent, me having the 3 children and them all being adult children, it's so much like I feel often that it's my role to help. And I think sometimes when our children don't need us, then we go, well, what it is it that we're adding to them, because for so many years we've been doing it. So again, I think it's just like mindset changing and having these conversations, because what I've also thought and seen is we stop worrying about what other families are doing, other people are doing, because at the end of the day, I know I want my 3 children to be friends with each other and to like each other. And if I start having behavior that potentially shows favoritism or not fairness, it's the surest way that I'm going to cause my children not to be friends with each other. And maybe if you've got a thought on that.
No, I definitely agree. It's what most parents want. If a loving, supporting parent is no longer around, well, then you'd like, your children to be loving and supportive of one another. So, treating things, making sure that there's not animosity, and like we said, having those open conversations with the children is a very good way to avoid the children having fights later on. Because we do sometimes see it, unfortunately. Everyone likes to think their children will always get along very well after death, and it's not always the case, but I think honest discussions ahead of the time can help.
Yeah, so for any of you that might want to have that kind of conversation and maybe be a bit nervous about having it on your own, I encourage you to contact your financial planning specialist at Chartered and have a family meeting with your adult children and yourselves and your planner, and we have seen great results from it. Tiffany, thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to us, and we do hope that the show has been helpful.